You're listening to We're All Gonna Die Anyway with Jess Wiener. Don't worry. This is a joyful podcast about life, death, and everything in between. I can't believe that this is going to be our last episode for this season. It has just been a swirl of excitement and nerves and incredibly heartbreaking, heart-aching, heart-making conversations with the guests this season. I couldn't be more overjoyed with your response. Thank you for your support. Thank you for telling it to friends, and thank you for your subscriptions and your reviews and all the things that I have to nag you about on social media, because that's just the world we live in. But thank you for making We're All Gonna Die Anyway a beautiful part of our conversation in this season of our lives. I knew that when I was going to talk about the show, I was going to share, which I have on many occasions, the inspiration for the show, which was my friend Myra, who passed away the very beginning of 2018. And as you know, I met her as a client and soon became friends with her after she was diagnosed with terminal cancer. It changed everything about my life, every single thing. The way that I look at life, the way that I look at death, the way that I look at living. And so this show is literally an homage to the impact that this beautiful soul had on my life and so many others. And as you know in this story, as I began to go on this journey in the last 7 or 8 weeks of Myra's life with her, I met her family. And I knew that on this program, one of the best ways that I could honor Myra and the inspiration that she provided me in my life was to introduce you to her older sister, Catherine. I met Catherine during this horrific time, a time that we would not wish on anybody else, the time that you know you have a limited amount of it left with your loved one. And I was nervous when I first met Catherine because I knew Myra adored her. I knew she was her older sister. I also always felt during that process that I was somehow invited in to this family that I had just met at the time of the most crucial passing and loss that their family is going to experience. And they, as a family unit, were nothing short of graceful and kind and loving and welcoming to me, who was at that time a stranger and who has since become a friend and a family member. I can truly say from the bottom of my heart and from my husband, Felipe, this is our chosen family. Myra knew what she was doing somehow when she called me up and asked me to come see her when she decided to stop her chemotherapy as she entered the last phase of her life, and her invitation into her family didn't end with her death. They are our family. They will be our family for the rest of my time on this planet. And that is a gift I never saw coming, and I am so glad to hold on to and to cherish and to nurture. So I wanted you to meet Myra's sister today. I think it's a wonderful full circle to this whole program, and we'll have more to come. But for now, let's have you meet Catherine, hear a little bit from her side, what that experience was like together. Catherine is an extraordinary writer, blogger, world thinker. She is currently a Canadian living in London, writing about global experiences during this crazy pandemic and time that we're in. And she is somebody who I can say, as I've witnessed her walk through loss, has done so with such depth and grace and honesty. She's the kind of person, you'll see this in our conversation, that doesn't shield away from the truth. In fact, I think it fuels her. And it's just one of the many things that I love and appreciate about her. I inherited 2 sisters when Myra passed. Her younger sister, LaVey, is also a deep part of my family, and I'll have to bring her on the show at another time. But today is for Catherine. Today is for a conversation as older sisters. And we're going to talk about our sisterhood, her relationship with Myra, how she's navigating such loss, and how she too has been inspired to reinvent and recreate things in her life, all due to Myra's love and inspiration, and by leading a good life, a life by example. That was one thing I know Myra wanted us all to really look at, is, are we living a life that we love on our own terms? And if not, to know that it's never too late. So without further ado, please meet my soul sister, Myra's sister, Katherine Zinger. Let's dig in. Hello, my sister from another mister and another mother. um, you have become a soul sister to me, and our connection point is a really unique and powerful part of my story. And as I was embarking upon doing this podcast and talking to people about the notion of urgent living and really waking up to their lives and really looking at what they're doing and spending their precious time here on earth. Obviously, I've talked a lot about and will continue to talk a lot about your sister Myra and her impact on my life and our coming together and kind of the ripple effect of what's happened afterwards.
Huge,
So
huge.
it's huge. And so I want to get to all of that, but you have also a remarkable story before the story of Myra intersecting us together. And so I wanted to start there actually and talk to you. I want to ask you some of the questions that I ask folks when we start off is, what do you know about your birth story? What do you know about when you were born? What was that like for your mom? Where were you born? What was the birth experience like? Do you know?
I know very little actually,
Really?
very little, except that it was in Manila. I believe it was I looked at my birth certificate. It was a Wednesday. I think it was 8 p.m.
Okay.
Um, Actually, very little. I have very early memories I can tell you about.
Yeah.
Um, that was after we had already immigrated to Canada. And I remember that I was not breastfed because I remember there was a bottle, and I remember running to the kitchen, giving my mom the bottle and saying, "Could you please reheat this?" That was my thing.
Did you say it just like that too?
I probably did. Probably. But it's interesting because as I was prepping for this, I was thinking about birth in general, and I was thinking about when Myra came into this world, and my mom brought her home. So that for
Yeah.
me was very pivotal.
How
Because
many years between you and Myra again?
4.
Okay.
4. And throughout this conversation, I'll reference that number 4 and how important it is to me.
Yeah.
But when my mom brought her home, I remember looking into her bassinet, and I had always been told that there was nothing more pure and more loving than Jesus Christ, because we came from a very Philippine Roman Catholic family.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember looking into her bassinet and thinking, well, that's baby Jesus. Because I didn't know anything else, right? So that became our secret nickname, which I'm now revealing to the world. So up until she passed, I would say, "What's your secret nickname?" And she'd say, oh, "Baby Jesus," because to me she was pure. She was pure love and pure beauty and pure joy.
Yeah.
I didn't know any other way. So right up until the end, she was baby Jesus.
Oh my God. So you're oldest of, are you the oldest?
I'm not. There's
not.
actually 4 of us, but I'm
There's
the
4 of
oldest
you.
girl.
You're the oldest girl.
Mm-hmm.
Then Myra, and then, no, sorry, then LeVay, and then Myra.
LeVay, and then Myra.
So Myra was the baby.
Myra's the baby.
And so born in Manila for you, raised in Canada.
Correct. So my brother and I were both born in the Philippines.
Okay.
My parents came in 71, and then LeVay and Myra were born in Canada.
And when you think back on your childhood, Catherine, if you could describe it in 3 words, what would those words be? Like first thing off the top of your head, not overthinking it. How would you describe your childhood?
Apart. A part. So those are 2 words. Okay. Apart. A part. Outsider.
Really? Okay. Talk me through all of those. What about apart?
As a visible minority. And of course, this is an incredibly poignant conversation given everything that's happening right now in the States. Yeah. As a visible minority growing up in a country that was primarily white, you understand right from the get-go that you don't fit in. But because I was an immigrant in a country where I tried very much to fit in, I made myself do everything to be a part of the world that I was living in.
Yeah.
As a result, you become a permanent outsider, a permanent chameleon. So that was a super easy answer for me.
That's so interesting. So you feel a part. You want
3
to
words.
Be a part.
A part.
Right.
1 word. 2 words. A part.
Right.
A part of, participating in.
Right.
3, an outsider.
An outsider. And
Mhm.
that is what it felt like lingering for you in childhood there.
It did. I think it depends on your perspective on those three words. You can view those three words in lack,
Mm-hmm.
which one does as a child, and then you grow older and with maturity and with time and with age, you can view those words with gratitude,
Mm.
and you can see actually it's a gift,
Mm.
because when you grow up a part and an outsider, you become very adept at change, very adept at transition and at dealing with major life change.
Yeah. Do you
Which
remember? So go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
no, which serves me well as being an expat who has not lived in America for over 20 years.
Right.
Right.
Do you remember the time of which you turned that feeling of lack into gratitude? Do you remember what age and stage you were at in your life where you started to look
Very
at the
late.
lesson of childhood?
Very late
Yeah.
in my 40s, and it was after I had discovered yoga, frankly. After discovering yoga and meditation and awareness and spirituality. So it was, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't have been able to get through Myra's death, as
Right.
I think, as well as I did, frankly.
What was your relationship like with Myra growing up?
I'm going to actually repeat what I said in her eulogy. And I said, I started off by talking about true love. And I said, I'm going to reference the Disney movie, oh my goodness, I can't remember, Frozen, where true love's first kiss actually came from an unlikely source, which was her sister.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly what we were. LeVay would say that we were soul sisters, but Myra and I had a very soul sister connection as well. She
Yeah.
was smart as they come. I mean, so smart. And so even when she was very, very sick and she was just sort of coming out of it, the doctors had told me that she had suffered a lot of what they thought would be severe brain damage. And I remember when she was coming to, she said, could you please look up the stats for cancer in 1980s? There was a study that was done by Harvard, and I believe there was some participation out of John Hopkins. Wants you to look at X, Y, Z doctor, and she just blew everybody's minds. She was ridiculously intelligent.
Yeah.
And there was just an innate respect that came not just from me, but from everybody who knew her,
Mm-hmm.
because of those smarts.
What kind of kid were you?
A thinker,
Mm-hmm.
very much a thinker.
See that.
Curious. I think I'm very adept at observing,
Mm.
and because of those observations and because of thinking, I probably overthink.
Mm.
And it just honestly just incredibly aware that I just did not belong.
Yeah.
Right.
What kind of impact does that have for you as you go out into your college life, into your career world, into your adult world and creating a family? Like, how much, you said you didn't have that sort of switch in awareness to become more grateful for that distance that you felt until in your 40s. So in between that time and then, can you share a little bit about like what that repetitive narrative of feeling like an outsider does, and how did that manifest in both work and family?
I think it's interesting because we had immigrated initially to Canada, as I said, and I don't know that many people know this, but growing up in Canada, there is a soft brainwashing that we all have as Canadians, that we are smarter than Americans. True.
I didn't
And
know that, but
so,
I don't disagree with that most likely.
so we sort of grew up with this. It's an inferiority and a superiority complex at the
Oh,
same time,
interesting.
right? So that really played in, for example, when I went to Russia to do my dissertation, and there was 5 Canadians and from McGill, and we went with a group of, I believe, 27 Americans. And so it was this sense that, well, we're smarter than you. So it was this idea of false superiority, based on the inferiority complex that we were raised with, frankly. Many Canadians will disagree with me, but show me a Canadian who has not backpacked across Europe without a huge, massive flag on the back of their backpack. There's a reason for that. Yeah. So that played a lot into it. So it was absolutely that soft brainwashing that even though I am an outsider, I'm smarter. You know, and it was really that, which is not, I'm not saying it was a great thing, and I certainly don't support it, but that helped me. It helped my identity. So when I first started in San Francisco, working with all these Americans, I was like, oh my God, they're really smart. You know, and it really sort of rejigged my thinking about Americans as a whole. I was like, not only are they as smart, they're smarter in some ways. And it began to open my mind that just because you come from a certain place doesn't make you superior.
And what career were you working in at that time? That was in PR?
Well, before the PR, I had started off I was a Russian interpreter in Toronto. Because I graduated from Russian and Slavic studies, I worked in the oil and gas industry as a Russian interpreter. I had just come off a year in France, solidifying my French. So then I got into marketing and PR in the high tech industry.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So it was super fascinating for me with this mindset of, I am an outsider, but I am determined to fit in with all the Americans. And I didn't. You know,
what were some of the dreams that you had as you were looking out at your career or your life? Was there one kind of predominant dream that you had that you were chasing? You know, I often talk a little bit about, like, dreams for me are guideposts and not goalposts, right? They're kind of like these, for me, they're markers of where I want to be heading. Sometimes we don't always reach the exact dream that we have, but I'm curious, like, what dream has stayed with you the most throughout your life?
When I was little, it was to be an artist, to be a ballet dancer. There was a book from the public library that I took out, and I felt very proud that if you looked at remember back then you had to, like, actually write your name down on the little library cards, right? I was really proud that for 2 years it was my name on this book of this ballet school that actually is here in England. And then after that, it was to be part of the UN. I wanted to be in the diplomatic corps. I'm not sure for what country, but that was my goal, is to someday live abroad and to have and to be able to represent my country.
Yeah. Did you dream about being a mom? Did you want to be a mom when you were younger?
I think it was a default, but it was never anything that I aspired to. And even today, that's not where I want my identity to be.
Yeah. Although you have you've helped to give birth and raise 3 incredible human beings in this world. So
thank you.
I mean, I'm a completely biased new auntie, but that is my reality of your kids. But yeah,
they're good kids.
They're good kids. No, they're good kids. They're smart kids and they're sweet kids. But you and I have talked most of the time about, in our more of our private conversations, about all of the multiple identities that women hold and aspire to hold. And, you know, the reason why sometimes I start with asking people about their childhood and their birth stories and that sort of stuff is because I'm kind of interested in our narratives that we adopt when we're younger or are given to us when we're younger. Because there's so many people I've interviewed who had troubling births and then therefore sort of like labeled a troublemaker in their life, or had, some of the narratives repeat. And I always find that those are the greatest things that we're working to overcome, or those are our greatest lessons that we're learning.
Well, Myra and I had the benefit of having a mother who was incredibly independent, very strong. And because she was an artist, and she had this, she's very musically gifted. And because of that, she always said to us, don't marry an artist. And she always said, you can never rely on a man. So you make sure that you get out into the world on your own.
Yeah.
But I think because of my particular childhood, I ended up actually going opposite. Well, I guess that's what every kid does. I ended up finding someone who was incredibly stable.
Yeah.
Well, I guess in a way I did listen to her because I didn't marry an artist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's just funny. I think sometimes our journeying to figure out maybe who we are as women and the identities that we want to take on in the world, they do shift and change. I mean, the conversations, although very brief, that I had with Myra, at the more towards the end of her life, were a lot about the exact same sort of musings, right? Which was about how do we learn about who we are and spend the time really discovering who we are. And I've seen that come up in your conversations now. So I want to kind of get into how we kind of came to be together and that unique experience. So you have lived in London for how long? How long were you away from, because you lived in New York for a period of time. You lived in, did you live in Connecticut? Or I know she lived
We did. We started off in San Francisco. We moved from San Francisco to Paris in 99. We lived there for 5 years. Paris, London, Connecticut, New York, London. So I have been in Europe now for this time around. I'm on my 11th year, but I think in totality, 20 plus years.
So you were living away from Myra. You have a very close relationship with her. She is an incredible marketing executive. I, have told people many times on this program, like I met her as a client.
That's right.
We were going to embark upon doing a series of projects together at her work. She was my impression of her prior to even getting to know her a little bit better, super well respected, funny as all get out. I mean, I think you and I have talked about like, she just was like sassy. She was smart, but also I loved her because she cursed, and I just really respect smart ladies who curse a lot. And so I don't know, we kind of fell in love right off the bat, so you're living apart from her. She's got this incredible career. She and her family are in the middle of getting ready to move, to California. And then from your perspective as a sister, what kind of comes up next for you during that time that you remember? Like, what was that experience like for you to hear the diagnosis that she got ill?
I disbelief, complete disbelief, and refusal to accept that this was actually happening. I think we all refuse to believe, right? To believe up until her very, very last breath. It was the day that she told me that she was even diagnosed, I was unpacking Sebastian, my eldest, for moving from one part of London to another. And I don't think I've ever been so productive, because within a day I had packed and unpacked and put away every item of clothing, not just of him, but of his flatmates, because I was so focused
you're hyper-focused
on keeping my hands occupied to not think about this. When I received the note, it's cancer, I don't even know how to describe it. It completely sucks. The lifeblood is way too shallow. It sucks the soul blood out of you to hear this. And then you think, I am going to get through this through sheer belief alone. This is not happening. This is not happening.
Yeah.
So it was groundbreaking.
I think, and I remember, when my memory of that I was sitting in a meeting with her, and she had been telling me that she hadn't been feeling very well, but had beliefs about what it might have been, like whether it was blood clots from flying or, like all those other kinds of things. And I think now also having a mother going through cancer, and I think anybody who's listening or watching who gets a diagnosis of cancer in a loved one, there is, like you said, I mean, there is this sort of like your stomach drops out, it's a moment of shock. It feels like, how is this happening to me? Although clearly it happens to everybody and in all different ways. But the part of holding on to hope, the part of believing that you could beat this, was that there for you from the start?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I held on to hope, but the amazing thing is I've got some amazing friends and LeVay, as you know, and I'm not sure if you know this, but when Oliver, Myra's middle child, was a baby, when he was 6 days old, he was diagnosed with, I believe, sepsis. And so he was very sick, and they didn't know if he was going to live. And when my own faith waned about his prognosis, I said, I don't know that I can do this. And I said, I don't know if I have enough hope and I have enough faith. And she said, well, that's when you hang on to mine.
Mm.
So I was very fortunate that I have an incredibly strong network of friends who said, when you are running low, you tap into our gas.
Yeah.
We've got this. We can do this together. And it was this, I had such an intense sense of gratitude. And I believe it was gratitude that got me through the whole thing. It's interesting because I listened to an interview with David Kessler, who was, as you know, the father of grief. And he talks about gratitude and being able to get through these incredibly intense moments at the time. And of course, you're not going to be grateful that someone is gone from your life or that someone is suffering this immeasurably, but you cling to that gratitude with your teeth simply for the fact that she's awake the next day.
Right.
Or that you have people who will say, take my faith, to let this hold you up.
Right.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
You came
The focus gets very narrow cast when somebody is ill, right? You really do,
completely.
by virtue of survival, need to focus on moment to moment and
100%.
experience to experience. So this whole process, unfortunately, unfolded very fast for Myra, from diagnosis to when she died. And but in that time, so much living happened. This is what I think I was right. This is what I think I'm walk away and still feel. But I want to talk. So I wanted to say, I thought maybe this part could be interesting. Like, I wanted to hear your side first of what you knew about, like, me coming into her life, like, obviously, because you and I had never met until we met at her home. And then I wanted to fill in my side and kind of tell you what was going on. Because I think out of all of the misery, and this is miserable, she is a beloved, beautiful human being that we don't get to enjoy in a physical form anymore in this plane.
Correct.
And a family was born and brought together in a way that I find quite mystical and magical. And it has transformed my life, and I believe ours. And it's
100%.
It's one of the reasons why I wanted to share this part of the story, because I don't know. I want to know if we're not alone. I want to invite people who are listening and watching to tell us if they've had similar experiences. But tell me, like, as you're walking through, like, you know, your experience of, because eventually you come over to support her and you're there in California with her and her family. But I just, like, walk me through that part of the story, and then how you hear about some rando and her husband coming over to their house.
Okay. So as I've mentioned, I've been an expat for so many years, and the way Myra and I connected was every summer we'd spend about 6 weeks together. I would head over to New York where she was living. And in those 6 weeks, Myra would say to all of her network, I'm shutting down, my sister's coming to town. And that, we had something called magazine and tea time. And we would sit with the Vogue magazine. We would never really, actually read it or any of these or decor magazines. We would flip through and that was our connection time. So it was during one of these connection times that Myra said, I've met someone really interesting that I think you're really going to like. And I remember looking up because she had this conviction in her voice that this was someone different. This was someone super special. And she said, she is a tour de force. Do you know that? Do you have that expression in English?
Tour de force.
And yeah, and she said she goes into companies and she builds up women's confidence and self-esteem. So you will meet her because when we move to California, she will be there. So in my head, I'd already known about this person. But peripherally, I just remember this particular glint in her eye when you came up. Because Myra talked a lot about a lot of people, but because it was specific to our Vogue and tea time, and the fact that she closed the magazine and she put the cup down on the saucer and said, I met someone. I mean, normally if someone were to say that, you'd think, oh shit, they're having an affair. It's not, but it was a real, listen, sit up and listen. There's someone who's really important that's come into our life. And this is just in parallel to everything that's happening in the country right now with Black Lives Matter. I was looking for a quote from Albert Einstein about how true evil in this world is not based on the actions that are being done, but in the silence. But as I was looking for that quote, a different quote came up, and that is, coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. So you were God's way of remaining anonymous. And it's amazing if you step back and you think, he knew. Yeah. And that's why he brought Jess into our life. So it was this woman that my sister had met in New York, and that you re-met again somehow in LA. And I knew that Myra was getting sicker and sicker. So I had come to LA, and all of a sudden there was this woman who spent every weekend, she and her husband, with all that you do, with as busy as you are, you looked forward. I remember your words. You said, we look so forward to the weekend where we come and get to spend time with Myra. And I don't think I realized until after her death that you only really knew her for her last 6 weeks of life.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
And the way I describe you to people, I say that this beautiful couple has come into our life. Myra chose them. But before Myra chose them, the universe or God or whatever deity that you believe in found them, and they directed you guys to Myra. I believe that I with every part of me.
I replay this story quite a bit. I think when we lose somebody that we love, we replay stories about them a lot. You know, I mean, I think it's our way of staying connected to them. For me, it's how I process grief. And I think, you know, still Myra died January 4th, right? 2018. And it's still, you know, it's just 2 years later, and it feels like yesterday. It's so fresh. And so I talk about her a lot. She's become a seminal part in my life and my work. But I do remember so this was my experience. So I met Myra, got, you know, hired to work for her company. She was going to be my contact. We were starting to get to know each other. She was just getting ready to move out from Connecticut to California. I had one meeting with her, Kate, in New York. I never got to have dinner with her. I never got to have a glass of wine with her. I never got to go on a walk with her. I never even talked to her.
You never got to see her wearing the skull t-shirts under the corporate
under the blazers. No, I only got the sort of like buttoned up Myra in the boardroom, like when we were doing a big brainstorming session on a marketing campaign. And I remember that I loved her even more, number one, because I told you she cursed, right? So, you know, if people were being ridiculous, which people often can be in corporate America, you know, she would kind of just be like, oh, these people are such fucking idiots, you know? And I just thought, oh my God, I love her. Like she just had, with she and I guess in a very short period of time, there didn't seem to be a lot of layers, which is rare because in corporate America, especially, people are pretty armored up. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And my experience of her was just, God, she's an amazing person. I knew she wasn't feeling well the day we were having that meeting. And she was talking to me about that. In fact, I even went, I think I've told you this, sorry for the TMI for those listening, but it was like, this is also how close we got. Like I'm her client. I mean, she's my client basically. And she's like, I'm really bleeding very heavily. I think I'm having a heavy period. Can you go and help me find some sanitary products while we were, you know, she was leading like an 8-hour workshop. And so, you know, I ran off and found her stuff to use. And there was an intimacy there in a professional setting that is what made me feel, and I was aware that this was different, and I was hopeful. I remember being aware that I was hopeful we would become
Why do you say
friends.
hopeful, Jess?
Because I was hopeful we would have become friends. Like I remember thinking at the time, like, oh, I really like her. You know, I work with a lot of people that I like, but I liked her. I felt connected to her in a way that I assumed I would have lots of time to unfold. Okay.
So I'm going to turn this back on you. So that hope that you had was the glint that she had in the Vogue and Tea Time.
Really?
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
So she recognized that. She chose us.
I know
she chose
did.
us. She chose this.
And it was so strange because when she moved out to California and began getting treatment, I had never met Henry before, and I certainly had never met the kids. And I don't normally go over to my clients' homes in really any way, shape, or form.
Now what I know about corporate America is I'm relearning so much, studying it from this side of the world.
Yeah. And I remember she disappeared from communication for a while because she was very sick and in the hospital. And I didn't know that until I just kept trying every way I could to text Henry, her husband. And I would, she'd given me his number. And so I would call and text, and I didn't get I didn't get any response really. And I thought, gosh, I hope she's okay. And I check in at work, and nobody really knew kind of what was happening in full picture there. So I sort of backed off for a period of time in communication, but she was always very present for me. And now I think when I look at this story in reverse, what's so interesting, right, is I can now see the places where she was present for me, and I couldn't really explain why. Again, because I didn't know her very well, but I could just feel her. And then Felipe and I went on a trip to Guatemala. We have a girls' school there. We do that every year. It's right around Thanksgiving. And during that time, or right as we got back, I finally got a response from Henry, and he gave me an update that Myra, because she had been going through chemotherapy and was in the hospital for a lot of different reasons around that. And then I remember him telling me she's going to stop chemo, and the doctors have given her a couple of months to live, and she would
Which
like
I
to see
refuse to
you.
believe. Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah, which is hard to believe. And I didn't, but the like, she'd like to see you. Can you guys come over tomorrow?
So what does that, I'm going to turn this back on you.
Yeah.
What does that feel like to find someone that you have hope to have a great friendship with, and then all of a sudden to be told your window
Yeah, it got way short.
is this?
I think I was in true denial. Like, I don't think I understood what was happening fully.
Like me.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was sort of like, well, how is this possible? And then I think, honestly, I got more involved, less in maybe mourning that hope or thinking, man, I don't have time. And I got more into like, why is she calling me there? Like, what am I
That's
like,
exactly it.
what can I do? Like, this is not quote unquote normal. Like, I don't know her. I don't know her intimately. When you're with sick people, because my mother is still sick in various ways with cancer. She's been battling cancer on and off for 5 years. And I know how intimate and messy and scary it is when people are sick with cancer. And I only imagine that I wouldn't want people that I don't have like this really deep, long-standing relationship with to be around me, if I couldn't help it. And I remember when we were driving, I told Felipe, hey, this, woman who I really admire and love is my client. She's sick. And, he knew of her. And I said, she wants us to come over. And we went to the farmer's market, and I asked Henry what the kids like to eat, and they love fruit. So I went and picked up a bunch of fruit at the farmer's market. We drove over to the house.
You bought soup, and you bought croissant.
Yeah. We got soup and croissants. And I remember she liked mango. We picked up mango and blackberries or blueberries or something. And when we got there, I hadn't seen her since July.
Oh my God. It must have been such a shock to you.
It was. And also it was like weird, Catherine, because, we've talked about this a little bit, but like we walked in and it was a good day for her when we walked in. Like, she was just in a good space. And as you talked about how everything gets really micro focused when somebody you love is sick, that day when we got there, she was lucid. She was able to sit up for a while. She certainly looked dramatically different, but our relating was different because I had never been inside of her home when she was healthy. I didn't meet her kids or her husband. And I kept thinking, honestly, what I kept thinking was, I feel so lucky.
Okay, well, exactly. I'm sorry to bring it back to David Kessler, but he has created this sixth stage, in grief, which is meaning. And I think that we got fast-tracked to meaning, you and me, because when someone suddenly is in your life who hasn't been ever a part of your life, and they're there in the last 6 weeks of a person's life, how could you not go, what does this mean?
Mm-hmm.
So we were instantly processing meaning before she even died.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
I agree with you on that. And I also think there was something that I learned about myself during this time that I quite have learned to love, actually, which was that I was not afraid to be with her and to witness any pain with her. I wasn't. No, I wasn't. I was able to hold a space for her in a way I never knew I could before. I've been with my grandmother when she died. I was there when she died. That's the only person I've ever been with I've watched their soul leave their body and or experienced that. And I was in my early 20s. And otherwise, mostly death has come to me as shock and accident or, something quite traumatic. And when Henry called really, and we went over to talk to Myra, and we spent 3 hours with her that day. And Henry said, she hasn't been out this much in a long time. And, she was able to eat a little bit with us, and we were having very wonderful conversations. And I thought, I just really, I could just hold the space. Nothing was going to scare me about being there to support her. I felt very called to be present for her in a way I couldn't explain. And I quite frankly
just
didn't
got goosebumps. I just got goosebumps with that verb. I felt very called. That's exactly right. And I just, like you, I kept leaning into this. It got me through. I kept leaning into this notion of gratitude. Yeah. I cannot believe that I get to be with her. I cannot believe that I get this time. It was really appreciating those last few weeks. Not believing that those were her last few weeks, but truly appreciating the minutia.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, she actually took in 2 ice cubes today. Right. It was huge. You cannot help but lean into gratitude.
Yeah.
You can't.
And we spent a lot of time. I mean, eventually it was in the beginning weekends, and then we spent more time because it ended up being during the holidays. We spent a lot of time together integrating our families. Me, Felipe and I, but for you, your kids came in, Simon came in, her kids were there.
You know what? I'm going to say this.
What?
Myra was incredibly selective about who she let into her life, into her private life. Very, very, very selective. So I think that we immediately embraced you two because she had given the go ahead. So it wasn't weird for us. Myra said, "These are my people." When come on in.
Yeah.
Come on in. I don't think we've ever had, there's no one that we've ever had come so immediately into our family, especially in the most intimate, tormenting time of our lives.
Yeah.
But there was no question.
I know. And there was no question from us either, which is really what begs me to say that I think this is the mystical part of death and dying that we often can miss if we are focusing on the loss, which I understand. We certainly dress rehearse the loss. We try to avoid the loss. We don't believe that the loss is coming. And we had those moments too, which I want to talk about, the kind of roller coaster. But the mystical part for me was learning somebody. So I feel like as an adult, we have our childhood moments, we have our childhood friends, we have our work friends, maybe we have our motherhood friends, if that's the path that you go down. But it is harder, I think, as you get older as a person to make real friends. You just, it just becomes you're either less socialized to meet people in that way, or just, I think making relationships as an adult can be harder. That's my experience.
No question.
And with this, it was like, I kind of had this moment. I remember many of those drives home because we live like 45 minutes from where they live right now. And I remember on those drives home with Felipe, I'd be like, I should feel weird that I'm like privy to this like beautiful family and their incredibly painful like moment. But also I'm really grateful because I'm getting to know about her, and she and I are having moments of really creating a friendship. But I know that there's a time limit on this friendship, and like, how do I feel about that? Like, we were processing constantly, and yet kept coming back and kept coming back and kept coming back because it felt like home.
The weird part about our whole experience together was it felt so natural.
I know.
That was what so weird. It felt so very natural in the most traumatic, weird event that was happening. That's the mystical part right there.
I know, because I was learning about her through your stories, through your memories. I was discerning a person through pieces.
Amazing. That is so amazing to me that you could learn about someone based on other people's experiences, and yet just you threw yourself in 150%.
I know, because I love her, and I love you, and I love the kids, and all of a sudden I said to Felipe, like,
this
I
is
want to be part of-
family.
This is my family. Like,
This is family.
we now have a Korean,
This is our
Filipino,
Russian
Jewish,
Cuba.
Mexican family.
Exactly. Come on in. We're all messed up. Come on in.
You know, but I think also for two people who choose not to have biological children, but instead choose to be global parents, we've always had this idea that we would be available to love other people's children. But I don't think we ever felt like we would also become a part of an adopted family unit as an adult, where you go, oh, and by the way, we had some candid conversations about once Myra is passed and she's got these 3 incredible children to raise, how do we as a village come together to support her husband while, you know, this new life begins again? And now last night, as I was talking to Colette, who's 13, and like, we're sitting, you know, I'm looking at Felipe, we're FaceTiming Coco last night. And I was like, I love this kid. Like, I can't believe sometimes I get so lucky to have her in my life and all the kids. And I would be lying if I didn't say there are some times that I feel guilty because I get to experience her children and she doesn't.
That's hard. That's really, really hard.
Because I think, like, who the hell, like, this is not fair. And how is this possible? And why am I getting to witness this? And then I go back into the calling part, which I'm like, she did call me to come. And I feel
100%.
like these are the divine moments I'm supposed to surrender to.
So let me go back to the idea of meaning. And this is a silly metaphor, but I remember one quote that really got to me in Steel Magnolias with Julia Roberts says to Sally Fields, "I'd rather have 30 minutes wonderful than a lifetime of nothing special." Huh. And as she was leaving us it was the 6 weeks, and then even in those last couple breaths that a person takes, was just a huge honor to be able to watch someone's soul leaving this earth. But even in those horrific moments, all I can think of was, I got way more than 30 minutes wonderful. I got almost 42 years of fucking spectacular. Yeah. So I understand. Rather than thinking about that guilt, think, how lucky am I? Yeah. I get Colette. Yeah. And how lucky am I? And I look at our situation and I think, well, first of all, I was so honored by the universe, honored by God, because I got the 42 years of spectacular. And then we got you and Felipe as a gift. How can we not be grateful? That's where I go. And that's what saves me. And I also want to say that with all of the yoga and meditation work that I've done, Myra always used to say, "Oh, don't give me your Oprah finding your spirit shit. I don't need to hear it." And as she was dying, she said, "Okay, it all makes sense to me now. It all makes sense to me now." Yeah. Everything is about our energy and where we channel it.
Well, I talk about that a lot on this program. The story of the conversation I had with her was actually on the first day we came to the house. We were sitting outside. I remember I brought mangoes. She could eat a little bit, but the mango was very acidic for her mouth.
Everything felt adulterated.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I remember when she had just gotten that diagnosis, and I asked her if she could share with me what she was thinking, right? About just knowing that there was like a time limit given. And I've told this story before, but the part that you were just talking about coming to an understanding of energy at the end, that's what she shared with me. She shared that one of her takeaways was that she had spent too much time focused on toxic people and people that, you know, didn't love her in the way she needed to. And she wanted to spend more time learning about herself. And like, these were the things that were coming up for her. And I thought, like, in my mind, my voice, like my inner voice, that sometimes nasty voice though, but this time was very pointed, and it was just like, yeah, but I was just like, shut up and pay attention. Like, listen to this message. Like, here is this accomplished.
This is for you. Yes. Right. This is for you. And you said it. You said, I understand that she came into my experience because she's my teacher.
Yeah. 100%.
You said that. I remember that very specifically. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No. You're right. I didn't know. I certainly couldn't have predicted that moment. I didn't know. I heard her loud and clear, and mostly more than heard her, I took it into heart. And it's literally why I've embarked upon these kinds of conversations, because the death, while fucking terrible and I wish didn't happen, there's so much living that happened during that time, and so much living that was given birth to from loss, that it started to shift my perspective of how we engage in death and how we think about death. And you're right. You know what? Her death didn't come as a shock where you heard about the news on the phone. You had the ability and the resource, thankfully, and the time to be able to sit with your younger sister and be of service and love her and guide her and take care of her family and do all the things that I know you do really well now. But you also got to witness and hold space and hold hope. You were a fierce holder outer of hope. And I know that that was hard for you. And I know that that was painful, because in a sea of submission, you were very focused until the very end that this was.
It was tough though. And I think if Amazon could do a profile on who this person was who was purchasing vomit bags for one side of the house, and then balloons to keep everybody else happy, 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 and colored dinner napkins, dear God, no white, I want colors and I want happiness. So it's very tough, because you're dealing with babies at the same time that need to let's all hope together. Then you enter the room of death.
Yeah.
It's this stark contrast between the two. And Jess, I don't know that it was strength that got me through. I just think you go into autopilot. And again, I keep saying this because this is God's honest truth. It was gratitude. It was gratitude that kept getting me through. But there were times, it was around Christmas time, because she, as you say, she died on January 4th. I remember I was out shopping and I could see all these people happy and smiling. And how could you smile and how could you be happy when my soul was leaving this earth? And I remember walking out and calling a girlfriend and completely bawling and sobbing publicly, because there was only so much I could hold on to. But a girlfriend had said to me after she passed, she said, strength is so overrated. She says, I'm not going to wish you strength in this time. I'm going to wish you grace. And if I look back, it wasn't strength that got me through. It was grace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say in the after moments in these last 2 years, that the legacy of Myra, which looms large in so many people's lives, both her family and friends and people who've known her, which, by the way, in my, estimation, is probably the best thing we could ever hope for in this life, is to have the kind of impact where, people hold you close, the memory close, the meaning closer, and love you even when you're not physically present with them anymore. That's a life well lived. And so that kind of brings me to like where this gift of witnessing her death, but experiencing her life and her love and her family and this kind of different connection, deep connection that will bond us forever. What it has given birth for with me has been these series of questions the last couple of years of what makes a good life. What is really important? We're at the middle age and stage of our life. We're in our middle passage, where the things that we've hunted in the future, the stuff that we've wanted, the career or the motherhood or the money or the whatever and the whatever and the whatever, maybe we've gotten it, maybe we haven't. Probably if we've gotten it, at least in my opinion, in my experience rather, what I've dreamed of and gotten hasn't always been the things that have made me happy. The things that I could have never imagined, like this. I
don't think I could have answered this question so simplistically, but I can now today after having gone through Myra's death.
Yeah.
What is all of this about?
Yeah.
And it helps me get through what's happening right now in the world and helps me get through the pandemic. So simple. It is so truly simple. It's to love and to be loved.
Yeah. And
maybe those people who are listening aren't in a romantic relationship, and that doesn't matter. So I will go back to the eulogy. True love was from sister to sister. True love is from Jess to Cece the cat. Mm-hmm. True love is from you to your grandmother. True love comes from this incredible connection you might have with a dog. And we say that there's the only unconditional love that can exist comes from a pet. That's true love. And if you've had true love in your life, then you've lived. You've truly lived. I know someone who says that, it's best to keep distance from people because you could get hurt. And I've been hurt and burned so many, many, many times. But if you don't truly love, then you don't truly live. And I think if Myra's life can be defined by the amount of people who carry her legacy through the way that we continue to love, the way you love her children, how much they love you, how much you and I love each other. She lived.
Yeah,
she truly lived.
Yeah.
And I could never have answered that before this. And that's how I view everything now. That's how we're going to solve everything, through true love. I just want to go back to the number 4. I look up and I see that there's total participants is 4. And when I saw that, I looked in the corner of my computer and it said 2044. And I was saying to LeVay yesterday, she walked into the living room and she saw the kids were watching a video of Myra, and she just said, it's really hard. It's hitting me now. I said, normally I would have seen that and thought, she's not here. She's gone. Ouchie. Instead, I think she's right here. They're constant signs. And the fact that I just saw 44 that's our number. Yeah. Because I'm June the 4th. Yes, I turn 50 tomorrow. She died on January the 4th. The number 4 is it has huge meaning for me.
Yeah.
And to look up now and see that, it's absolute proof that she's right here, Jess.
Yeah.
She's hearing you. She's hearing this love that is very evident when you speak of her children. You can't make this shit up. It's right there. It's honest to God for me. It's that simple. How much have you loved? How much were you loved in return? And even if it's just by a cat, that's true fucking love.
Yeah. I can't agree more. The death that I experienced with my grandma, I remember I was on my way out, moving out to California, and I got called back because they knew she was going to be passing. And luckily I got to be there in time. And I noticed a couple of things then. I think I was maybe like 25 years old. I remember, first of all, I remember watching, right, like what was happening, which was not everybody could get back, right? So in some ways, I think when you're younger, I'm kind of like, what is this moment going to look like for me? And you don't know, you never know. There was like somebody in the room, her aide, that we didn't know before this moment, but had been a very big part of the end of her life. So here was this like stranger to us. Some of the family could get there. We were all kind of holding hands and standing around her. And obviously we were looking at her body dying. Her body was definitely letting down. But I remember like looking around her room and I thought, none of this shit matters. Like what she wore, what she ate, what she owned, none of these possessions matter at the moment. Just to back you up on this, at the moment, what mattered was who she loved and how she loved. Because God willing, there was love in the room as she took her last breath. And there are many, many people who do not get that. There are many, many people who do not have that ability to be connected to loved ones as they leave. But the things that you're talking about, the signs, the connections, the communication and the presence that I think happens beyond. I've talked about that with many guests on this program, that
they don't feel that.
Oh no, they do.
Oh, I was going to say
that there is this special life that happens after death, that there are dreams, that there are symbols, that there are connections. And I know a lot of people will call that phooey, and I believe in it so wholeheartedly.
100%. We had a grief counselor who came to the house to deal with all of us, and my mom was there at the time, and he said, we believe that death is so final, but what's so important that you understand is that your relationship with whoever is transitioning is forever. Mm-hmm. So this relationship that I have, that you have with Myra, it's never going to stop. And it goes beyond me transitioning. And we pass it on to our children.
Yeah.
And it's this continuation, this continuation of this incredibly beautiful relationship that was based on love from that second I looked into her bassinet and saw pure love.
And
it doesn't
baby
stop.
Jesus.
And baby Jesus.
I think I've heard that before, but I loved hearing it again in this capacity.
Well, people didn't know. I mean, I remember when I was first talking to her and she was in the hospital, she could barely speak. And I said to her, "What's your nickname?" And she sort of croaked into the phone, baby Jesus. And I heard LeVay in the background going, what the fuck? Wait, what?
Yeah. What do you, when you think now about the things that you've learned about how, you know, love and letting, you know, being loved and loving as a core component. And you mentioned, you know, tomorrow is your birthday and you're hitting this milestone. What would you say now makes a good life for you? Like, how are you defining that for yourself? How are you knowing that you're moving towards a life that you love on your own terms?
I would just repeat everything that I said. I think that we try so hard to accumulate and to acquire and to look around. And part of that accumulation is, how many friends do I have? And if you've gone through something as huge as this, if you've met people that, as you say, are seminal to this major soul transformation, you think, you know what, I could go tomorrow. I have loved.
Yeah.
I have been burned, but I have loved. And I have been loved. I'm good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about that in the stage and place I'm at in my life. I'm re-examining my value system and what I hold
Mm-hmm.
most dear. And I think actually the examination of that was happening before I met Myra. If I go back and look at my journals and I look at some of the growth that was happening for me, you know, I had been married to Felipe for a couple of years. That was a
Right.
big moment for me at the time of, you know, I got married later in life. I knew then what I wanted in a relationship. My biggest struggles of the last maybe 7 or 8 years had predominantly been around work and my relationship to it and my relationship to success and what I thought would fill me up and external validation and all of the things, you know, that keep you running on that hamster wheel. And I think that I had been in that space considering a new value system. And then I think when I got called to Myra and sat outside with her, and she shared that the thing she was thinking the most about wasn't that she wished she could have worked harder or gotten this title
Or
or
had a
made
bigger
more
title.
money.
Right.
Right. That what she wished she had done was really loved and appreciated her body for what it could do, you know, including tasting mangoes without them being bitter and, you know, unkind to her mouth, to spend more time clearly. Because at the time Colette was outside, I remember when we were having this conversation, she was drawing something outside and Myra was looking at her and of course was acknowledging the loss that she knew was going to come from not seeing her kids grow up. And I remember just looking at her and thinking, if this little, you know, guru Buddha's, you know, angel person who summoned me here is telling me that what matters most to her as she sees a time limit, a real time limit on her existence here, is none of the things we spend most of our time on. In fact, it's the thing that you can't even often measure, right? Which is your
Correct.
love to yourself, to connection, to your family, whatever that looks like, whatever the makeup is. And I I will be forever changed and forever grateful for that gift, because I felt like it was the tipping point for me into really reevaluating who I love and how I spend my time.
How you spend your time, which for me, it's now, I have that. I know that I know whom I love. I know how much I love, and I know how much I'm loved. So we now switch into, again, that sixth stage, which is meaning, what do we do with that now? What do we do
Yeah,
with that? And I don't. And to go back to coincidence, it's no coincidence the timing of this interview and what's happening right now in the world.
I
What do
know.
we do with that? What do we do with that? Now we take this relationship, we take these platforms, and we go out and we use it for good, because the only way we're going to solve everything that's going on out there right now is through true love. You throw me rocks, I'll throw you bread. That's how we're going to solve this. I believe.
Mm,
And I think that the meaning that you and I had tapped into, when, without being able to define it back
totally.
then, we take that forward. We do something with it. We
Yeah.
do something with it. If you can connect and identify and have an awareness of that deep love that's within you, the best way to share that gift is to share that gift.
Yeah. Your sister LeVay, last year, end of last year, gave me a pair of Myra's boots. I never wanted anything from her, never really had the shared experience to know even any physical thing. Right. And I remember one night we were over with the kids and LeVay must have been cleaning out closets or something. And she was like, what size shoe are you? And honestly, Myra and I were not the same size feet. And I still put on these boots and they fit perfectly, which is bananas.
It's so weird.
It is so weird. The boots say they're 7.5.
Except that it's not weird.
I know it's not weird, but here she's a 7.5. I'm an 8.5. I'm like, no, I can't put those shoes on. They're not going to fit. It was like fucking Cinderella. It was like it fit perfectly. And I remember I was like, oh my God, I'm wearing her shoes. And like, I remember saying to Henry, I don't know anything about these shoes. Like, I don't know what memories were made in them. Like, I don't know. I never saw her wear them.
Right.
And then, so anyway, and they're super comfortable, obviously, because they're worn in and they were lovely. They're beautiful brown tall leather boots. And then the other day we were back at the kids' house, we were swimming, and Georgie, her youngest daughter, is looking at videos of mommy on the phone. Right. And we do that a lot. So we keep her presence really alive. And she's looking at videos of mommy and she was scrolling through the phone and I saw a picture of Myra in those boots.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding. And I like said to Henry, like, whoa, stop. Like, those are the shoes I have now. Like, where was this? And it was somewhere in New York or Connecticut. And she was bundled up because they were like, they're tall leather, wintry boots. He couldn't remember anything about that picture or what those boots were about, but it didn't matter, Kate, because for me, it was just like, I got to see her wearing them. And I think that's kind of what I needed because it brought her back to be real again for me.
They weren't just some boots that were thrown off in a corner. They actually had meaning for her.
Yeah. There was a moment that she had them on her body and it was just, I don't know. I look at symbols and rituals and memories and the things that we can do while we're granted the gift of life after somebody's died to keep them alive, but also to keep us alive, right? That's hope for me. That's happiness for me. That brought me joy. That brought me closer to Georgie, when she was like, you have mommy's boots, we were talking about the things that we can do, both physical and non-physical, to keep people we love present with us.
Absolutely. I get it.
Well, yeah.
Well, Fort Knox, who is my close circle of friends.
Yeah, that's what you call them.
But they asked me, you already know, Catherine, what is it that you want for your 50th? And don't hesitate. Just tell us what it is. Make our life easier. I said, okay, this is what I want. I want to get on a plane. I want to see my father the second that they allow visitors into his nursing home. I want to make my niece a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I want to hug the people that I love. And I don't know that I would have answered that the same had it not been for this death. It gives you completely different perspectives on everything. It makes you appreciate this. This is the stuff that matters. The memories that you are embracing from a period you didn't even know anything about. That's what matters. And can it be bought? Absolutely not. It's the intangible. That's the stuff that really truly matters. And we say it all the time, but until you've dealt with something as huge as this, until you're forced to hit the reset button on all your assumptions, it's just noise.
It does.
It's just noise.
Yeah.
But it's not noise, and it's not mysticism, and this is our reality, and this is the God's honest truth, and we were gifted with each other, Jess. And I will say it often. I'll just say, I know I sound like a kook, but. And someone I met at a yoga retreat said, stop apologizing. Stop saying that you sound like a kook. Yeah. This is the God's honest truth. This is reality. We're blessed.
I think that's also why I wanted to talk to you on this program today, because you exist so much in my personal life. And I've started to share some of the stories about my experience with Myra and your family publicly. But I think by us doing this, it becomes even more real. And my hope, honestly, is that people who are listening and watching, like I, said, I feel like I'd like to know if this also has happened for other people. I want people.
Yeah, I'm super curious.
Or I want to just share it so that people know it's possible. Or maybe when they're called to do something that feels uncomfortable or scary or unfamiliar, they still step up and do it anyway, because I think about a million ways I could have answered Henry's text, right? I could have avoided, I could have not come, I could have made an excuse, but honestly, never crossed my mind. There was this part of me that was like, oh, okay, well, we got to go to the farmer's market. We got to bring something. We got to help bring health and wellness into this world. Like it was like literally the call happened. And I was like, ta-da, like, let's go. But it was not about, it was just
the
about
call equals the calling.
the colleague
that
pulled
was
the
it.
calling. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't doubt it. And I'm really glad that I didn't. And I didn't avoid it. And I'm really glad that I didn't. And I couldn't agree with you more, sister, that at the end of the day, we're measured, by who we love and how we love, both internally. And for me, it's like now become the most important form of measurement of a life well lived is a life well loved.
A life well loved. There's no other measurement. There's no other measurement to me. And I hope you know how deeply, vastly, widely, passionately, madly that you and your husband are loved. I hope you know that.
We do know that. And we share it right back. Like, truly, this is like the biggest gift to be a part of this family. And I'm so happy that we got.
And for us, you are the gift. Every time I get on the phone with my mom, I told her that we were having this conversation, and she goes, "Dear God, Myra gave us the biggest gift. Myra gave us such a gift. It's a gift."
It is a gift. Mm-hmm. And your love is a gift. Your sister friendship is a gift. And this conversation was a real blessing and a gift today. I hope it lights up those who are listening. And most of all, I love you. Happy birthday tomorrow.
Thank you.
And I look forward to doing this life with you as long as we've got, honey.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There will be lots of reciprocity, because there's much to say, much to share, and so much love to give.
Yes.
Mwah.
I love you. I don't know how much more I could really say about this conversation, because I feel like so much of what I feel I left in that moment with Catherine. But a couple of things that I come away with, I mentioned in the beginning, I didn't think a conversation like this might be something I do publicly at the time. And of course, it's become a really important part of my life, talking about Myra, talking about this experience. Mostly because sometimes I still can't believe it. I can't believe that I have this incredibly rich, loving family dynamic and relationship with people who are strangers just 3 years ago. So if there is anything I could take away from this and hopefully really kind of share with you, it's that we never know what is around the corner for us. We never know what the world has in store for us. And oftentimes we worry about that and we try to control that, and we're afraid of that. And I certainly could have chosen to be negative and defeated by the experience that I had in meeting somebody who was leaving this earth. But instead, and I can't really say I was super conscious for it the whole time, it just was the way I reacted. I was open and I was accepting. And the gift I got in return, even though I faced a loss, was such a gain. I gained a family, I gained a community, I gained a friend, and I gained a sister. And I think that's really what I'm holding on to at the end of this conversation with Catherine today, is what she said was the gratitude, and how we find meaning in grief. We find meaning in death and in loss. And so that's why I wanted to do these conversations. I wanted to make sure that even though we honored and acknowledged that things do end, that there are so many beginnings and so much life that also happen for us. And what a blessing that is. I'm curious if you've listened today or watched today, if you've had an experience like this. Have you found love or connection or family or friends through loss? Have you discovered or developed some part of yourself that you didn't anticipate developing because of loss? I'd love to hear those stories. You can email me at podcast@jesswiener.com. I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to know where this resonates for you, how this might have lifted you up, given you some new ideas. I really always appreciate you listening and holding the space for these conversations. You've been listening to We're All Gonna Die Anyway with me, Jess Wiener. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And you can also watch this podcast by checking out my YouTube channel for filmed episodes, behind the scenes footage, and all other kinds of amazing video goodies. And of course, you can always visit me at jesswiener.com. We're All Gonna Die Anyway is exec produced by me and produced by Lauren Chavez Myers. Our episodes are recorded, filmed, and edited by Jeff Franklin and Adam Lippert of B Film. And our original amazing music is by Becca and Destiny Petrell. As always, I want to send a special thank you to the love of my life, the amor de mi vida, Felipe Lopez. And if you love this podcast, please make sure to tell your friends, subscribe, and leave a review at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. Most importantly, if there is something that stood out to you from today's episode, I want to hear about it. So if you want to share your own story, leave a comment, ask a question, please send me an email at podcast@jesswiener.com. I can't wait to hear from you. Bye, babies.